Jiujitsu2000 here today. I'm back with another reloading video. I got some great information for you. I'm going to be reloading one of my favorite bullets of all time, the 7mm Remington Magnum. I hope you enjoy the video. I plan on sharing some pretty cool secrets with you. Right now on my bench, you can see that I have a handful of items. These are items that I like to use during the reloading process. I'll just start here on this side, over here where my hand is, and I'll work to the right. The first thing that I want to recommend is obviously your safety glasses. This is always, you know, my first choice of things that I want to recommend. I want to make sure that your glasses are free of obstructions, that they're clear, no scratches, and put them on and keep them on throughout the remainder of this process. Underneath those, you can see here I have some reloading manuals. These are important because these are the manuals that you're going to use to get your load data to find the particular recipe for the bullet that you're going to be reloading. Here are just a few examples. This is the Lee reloading manual. This is a great manual. It has tons of good information in here. You know, and one thing that I know about this manual is it's a little bit on the conservative side when it comes to reloading. So if you want recipes that are a little bit hotter, or you know, that have a little bit of power behind them, I'd recommend finding a different source of information. But I'm just looking here real quick just to see what kind of recipe it's throwing out for me here. Bear with me. Today I'm going to be using 160 grain nozzler partition bullets, so I'm looking. Well, yeah, it stops. Yeah, so yeah, again, just like I thought, this is a little bit conservative. I'll talk about that in a little bit in a minute. The actual powder company that you're going to be using, whatever type of powder, like today we're going to be using Hodgdon. You can see here at the bottom of the can, there's a website, hodgdon.com. Whoops, sorry about that, folks. See that? Hodgdon.com. They have on their website, they have a reload data center. And a lot of the powder manufacturers have that same thing. In fact, you know, the Alliant powder company, you know, I use Alliant Unique and Red Dot and Blue Dot and stuff like that. The Alliant powder company has a couple of things that if you happen to be using that powder for whatever you're reloading, they have an Alliant powder manual, and it also covers the 7 mag, and it tells you what powders they recommend for the 7 mag and things like that. It gives you some general reloading data. It'll give you things like overall lengths. It'll give you what primers they use, and it's kind of simple, but it does tell you some information. Now, one thing that I want to make perfectly clear when you're reloading this 7mm Remington Magnum cartridge is I want to make sure that you completely understand that when you're looking into the reloading manual for data, for load data, don't be looking at 7 Rem Ultra Mag. That's a totally different bullet. You might be looking at 7mm Remington Short Action Ultra Mag. You might be looking at 7mm Shooting Mag, Weatherby Mag, Shooting Times Westerner Mag. There's just, you know, WSM, 7mm WSM. These are just totally different bullets. So make sure when you're looking at load data that you're looking at 7mm Remington Magnum, nothing more. And this, you know, it'll go down to 160 grain bullets, and it'll kind of give you some ideas of what kind of powders and things you can use. So again, if you go to the Alliant website, or again, whatever IMR or Hodgdon.com, and find, and you can, at least the Alliant will send you these little load data sheets. I don't think Hodgdon does, I don't think IMR does, but what they will do is they will give you information that you can print. Now these in my hand happen to be from the Alliant Powder Company, but I'm just giving you these as an example. A lot of powder manufacturers, you can go to their website and get load data. Another good information source is the Lyman, and I use the 49th edition. This is the handbook. This is a beautiful source of information. I'm flipping in and I'm going to 7 Remington Mag. It gives you tons of specs, tons of information. It shows you all the bullets that you can do, all kinds of stuff. It gives you your trim lengths, it gives you your overall lengths, it gives you what types of primers, and all kinds of good information in this manual. So don't overlook this. This is a great source of information. Another thing that I like to do, another source I should say, is reloading magazines. Sometimes in these back of these reloading magazines, if they have a new powder coming out or something new, they'll put that data in these magazines. So you know, if you're looking at something new, make sure to look into something like this. If you've got some new exciting powder or something like that that you're dealing with. So yeah, they have these listed by caliber, just like any other load manual. Okay, so that's another source of information. Don't forget about that. If you're going to be casting, which we're not today, but if you were, you could use this Lyman Cast Bullet Handbook. This is a beautiful source of information, and it tells you tons of things. 7mm Remington mag, so if you were going to be casting your own lead, you know, it'll tell you what molds to get and what kind of trim lengths and what kind of sizing you need to do on your lead and what kind of primers they used. It'll tell you all kinds of very valuable information on that load. So don't forget about this. So those are some sources of information that you'll need for load data. Now let's move on. Next, you're going to need your brass. I'm going to be loading 10 rounds today. You're going to need a shell holder. This shell holder has a small cutout in the bottom, and what this cutout does is it fits into a corresponding groove in your reloading press. So you'll need to have a shell holder. Obviously I have a piece of paper, I have a pen, and what I like to do before I even hit the reloading is I like to do all my research, and I like to write down my load data. And I like to keep that very close and very handy because I refer to this many times during the process. So keep that handy. You're going to need some dies. These are some chrome plated Pacific reloading dies that I've used for years. These are 7 mag. These are good dies. However, we're not going to be using those today. I'm going to be setting those aside. I just brought them out to show you an example. We're going to be upgrading our dies to the RCBS dies. These are full-length dies. These are great. I love RCBS dies. They come in really solid plastic containers. So those are the dies that we're going to be using today. Obviously there's a decapping die, and there's a bullet seating, and it'll also put a roll crimp on the bullet. So there's 2 dies in this set. When it comes to dies, you know, there's tons of manufacturers and things like that. But my personal opinion, I really like RCBS. You can choose whatever dies you want. You're going to need some primers. Today we're going to be using Winchester Large Rifle Magnum primers. And if you do that, make sure that on your load data that you're specifying whether it's Magnum or regular primers, because some of these 7 mag bullets, they'll have a recipe for primers and they'll call for just a regular large rifle primer. So be aware of that. If it says large rifle or large rifle Magnum, make sure you understand the difference, because that will affect your performance of your bullet, and it could put you, if you're on the upper end of the echelon, you know, of how hot you're building that bullet. If you're on the high end of that spectrum and you use a mag primer when they're calling for a large rifle primer, it could send you into the dangerous zone. So things could happen. So make sure that you understand clearly that you're using the right primers. This is the Nosler partition bullets. These are 160 grain. These are the bullets we're going to be using today. These are great bullets. I like these. These are good hunting bullets. 160 grain. They have basically 2 parts of lead inside. These are our bullets we're using. So make sure when you're looking up your load data that you're getting the right bullet, not just the primer. We've got our powder. This is Hodgdon H4831 Shortcut. And you're probably wondering why isn't he using IMR 4350? Man, to be honest with you guys, I use IMR 4350. It's a great powder. But for this video, I'm choosing this powder. I've been playing with it for quite a while, and I'm really liking the way this powder pushes my 7 mag. The IMR 4350 is a beautiful powder, but from my experience, when I pull the trigger, that powder has like a big hard kick. This powder seems to release a lot smoother, but yet I'm developing higher velocities, and it's a lot smoother recoil on the firearm, and I'm getting good accuracy. This is also an extreme powder, so you want to keep that in mind. That's a good thing. Obviously I have a powder funnel here. I have a little glass cup with a small dipper. The reason I have the dipper is because if I pour powder in here and I'm going to be dipping the powder, I don't want to get my fingers into the powder, because my fingers have all this oils and things on my fingers, and I don't want to contaminate the powder, so to speak. So I have a little dipper and a glass jar that I'll be putting powder in. I have a powder trickler. Okay, we might or might not use this. I'm not sure. I have 2 scales. I have a digital scale, battery operated, Frankfurt Arsenal. This is a really good scale. Measures up to, I believe, 750 grains. That's a good scale. And I also have in the back there, I've got the RCBS 502 scale. So that's a little bit about powder and scales. Here in this section, I have a lock stud that I put into my drill. Okay. This is a good way to trim your brass. So I put this lock stud into my drill. Then I have the appropriate shell holder and the appropriate length gauge. And what this does is the shell holder will hold the brass, and then it'll thread onto this. You'll see this a little later in the video. But basically, so I'm going to kind of make it short right now. I don't want to get too long-winded. So you got those components, and this is the cutter, and that's what we're going to use to trim our brass today. We're also going to use a Hornady deburring tool to deburr the inside of the case mouth as well as the outside of the case mouth. We have a primer pocket cleaning tool, very simple, made by Lee. We have a a case mouth brush to clean the cases out. This tool is a flash hole deburring tool. I'll talk about that later. We've got a crescent wrench, some channel locks. I have a small flashlight. Make sure that if you have a flashlight that you got good batteries in it, because we might need to shine light on something. Digital calipers. You could use analog calipers if you want. Dial calipers, those are fine. I have a bullet puller over here in case I make a mistake. I have some oil for my press. This is the primer catch for my press. And back here I have 4 different methods of lubricating my brass. You've got this unique, which is kind of like a wax almost. You basically get it on your fingers and you rub it on the cases. That's one option. You got the Dillon case lube. You got the Hornady One Shot, and in a pinch you can use Pledge. I've used that before. And obviously I've got a rag in my hand in case I need to clean something. And last but not least, the RCBS Partner reloading press, single stage press. So those are some of the items that you'll need to reload this cartridge. The first thing that I like to do personally before I get too busy reloading is I like to take this 3-in-1 oil and I like to lubricate the ram of my press. So I'm just going to raise the ram up and I'm going to drop a few drops of oil on the ram. A few drops on each side of the ram, and what this will do is this will lubricate and it'll make things operate real nice and smooth. So I'm just going to raise the ram a little bit, get this thing nice and lubed up so it's ready to go. you can take your rag here and wipe off any excess oil. This is also a good time to install your primer catch tray. This catches the spent primers and it just pushes against the back right here. So when you raise the ram, your spent primers will fall into that tray. And also, you want to install your shell holder at this point. Okay, remember that corresponding groove? It fits right there into the press. Let me get a closer look for you so you can see very clearly what we're talking about. See that groove there? We're basically just going to put this shell holder right here and push with our thumb. You can see that it snaps right into place. So that press is ready to go. It's lubed, it's ready to go. We got our primer catch. Everything is ready to go as far as our press is concerned. At this point, it's time to take our dies and we want to install the first die, which is the decapping and resizing die. Now, one thing that I want to note is the length of the decapping pin. Okay, this decapping pin, you can see clearly that it's sticking out way too far. So I'm going to make a quick adjustment. So I only want that decapping pin to stick out about 3/16 of an inch or so. Not too much. Don't want it sticking out too far. So I'm just going to loosen this stuff up. And I'm going to lower, I'm going to back it out till it's just barely sticking through. Sorry, I need to do that with this stem here. Sorry. So I just want that thing about 3/16 of an inch. You don't want the decapping pin to stick out too far, because if you do, you'll have a tendency of breaking your decapping pin. So I'm just locking everything into place, and that decapping die is ready. So now to install the die, we're going to raise the ram on the press, and we're going to thread the die down until the die body touches the shell holder. This will get us set up for the decapping step. There, once it touches the shell holder, then you're going to lock the die lock ring. Now when you lock this, it doesn't have to be gorilla tight or anything, just snug it up, nothing crazy. So that die is set. Now we need to go over here and we need to lubricate our brass. Okay, the method of lubrication that I've chose to use today is the Dillon Case Lube. I like this stuff because it has two components. It has isopropyl alcohol and it has lanolin. And what the alcohol does is it's used as a propellant to send the lanolin through the air, and it coats it against the cases. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this little ice cream bucket here, this little plastic bucket. I'm just going to pour my brass inside. I'm going to spray them with this Dillon Case Lube. Bear with me on the camera work, folks. So there's a look inside the bucket. You can see my brass is in there. So I'm just going to take my Dillon Case and I'm going to give it a few generous squirts. And that's all it takes. It doesn't have to be like a mile thick. That's more than enough lubrication. Okay, our die is now set. Our cases are lubed. And now from here, I'm going to take this small loading block and I'm just going to set it somewhere near the press. Nothing too crazy. And I'm going to pull these cases out one at a time. They're already lubed. And I'm going to run them through this decapping and resizing operation. Now, there's a lot going on right here as far as decapping and resizing. On the upstroke, what I'm doing is I'm resizing the outer diameter of the full length of the brass, and I'm knocking out the primer. So two operations. Now, when I start to lower my ram, you'll feel like this little catch right here. When that catch happens, that's the third thing happening. And what it's doing is it's resizing the diameter of the case mouth on the downstroke. There's a little expander ball on the die. And like I said, it does three things. It sizes the outer diameter, it sizes the inner diameter of the case mouth on the downstroke, and it knocks out the old primer. Once I get these out, I'm going to take my primer pocket cleaner and I'm just going to clean the primer pockets very quickly. I'm going to put those babies in the shell holder, or excuse me, in the loading block. So here's another look. I go up, knocks the primer out, down. So that catch that you feel, again, is normal. Don't freak out. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Let me get you. And a lot of people are probably wondering, you know, how does this little press do? 7 mag is a fairly large cartridge. You're right, the 7 mag is a fairly large cartridge, but this press does great. I've never had a bit of problems with it. In fact, I've even used my old Lee press and it worked fine too. And if you're curious as to which Lee press I'm talking about, I'm referencing the one where I did the videos on how to set your dies. So it's a very straightforward process. And that's all 10. Now it's time to trim the brass. Now, trimming the brass is very important. A lot of people kind of overlook this step, and I'm always telling people, make sure you're trimming your brass. These Lee trimmers, you know, it comes with a case length gauge and a shell holder, and these are a very inexpensive way to trim your brass. So basically what happens is you take the cutter and you insert the case length gauge into the cutter. You might need to take a small pair of channel locks and just twist it until you find that this is flush. This edge right here where my fingernail is, you want to turn it until it's flush, until it stops basically. And what that'll do is that'll give you the correct length when you cut these. So this is how it works. You've got your drill. You've already got the lock stud in your drill. You're going to take the shell holder and you're just going to slowly start to thread it. You'll take a piece of brass, insert it into the shell holder, and tighten up your drill until it locks. From here, what you're going to do is you're going to put this inside and you're going to push this cutter in until this point right here bottoms out against the shell holder. When that happens, you're going to be trimming your brass. Now you notice that this brass is still lubricated, and that's because I want that lubrication for this trim. So I'm just pushing it through until it bottoms out. Now if you compare a piece of brass that's been trimmed to one that has not, you'll see that the one that's been trimmed is very shiny. See that? Okay, now while I have it in the drill, after I've trimmed the brass, it creates these small burrs, and these burrs need to be removed. So I'm going to use my deburring tool very lightly on the outside diameter of the brass. And I'm not trying to remove a bunch of material. I'm simply trying to remove those burrs. And I'm going to do the same thing on the inside of the case mouth. Very small amount of removal on the inside of the case mouth. Okay, you don't want to remove too much. When you're done, you remove the piece, you put it at the opposite end of your loading block. Insert another. Do it again. This is a fabulous way to trim the brass without breaking the bank. So you just go in until it bottoms out. That brass looks nice. It looks beautiful. Those case mouths are really clean. You'll know when to stop because it just flat won't cut no more. The key detail here is you don't want to remove a bunch of brass from the inside of the case mouth. Don't want to do that. That's bad news there. These cutters work great if you have small amounts of brass to do. Since I'm only making a batch of 10 bullets today, they're perfect. Again, not to reiterate too much, but small brass removal on the inside of the case mouth. I know I'm saying that a few times, but I just want to make sure that I stress that and make sure you guys understand that. Like that one removed quite a bit of brass, so this brass piece must have been a little bit longer. Another thing that you could do while you're in this process, while you're at this step, is if your brass was dirty, you could take some 4/0 steel wool and a little bit of water. You could hold that steel wool in your fingers here and clean your brass at this point. If you didn't have a tumbler or something like that. That's another option to think about. Trimming your brass is important for many reasons. One of the most important reasons is it gives you uniformity when it comes to the release of the bullet. And it also gives you a uniform crimp if you're putting a roll crimp on them. You notice I'm not going like crazy fast or anything. I'm just taking my time and I'm rotating this thing nice and slow. You know, I don't need to go 5,000 RPMs. If you start going really fast, you'll be taking off way too much brass on the inside of the case mouth than you need to. So just go real slow, be patient, take your time. Obviously there are other methods of trimming your brass. Lathe style trimmers work really good. The lathe trimmer that I use is the Lyman Universal. It works really well. But again, I'm only doing 10 pieces today, so no need in breaking out that lathe and things like that. Now if I was doing 100 or 200, yeah, I might get out that lathe. But for 10, this ain't hard at all. Another thing that this is nice about, you know, when you're trimming this stuff by hand and you're working the brass by hand, you're looking at the brass a lot, and that gives you another opportunity to inspect the brass as you go, and you might see any impurities in the brass or in the metal or cracks or anything that might create problems. So, and that's why I like doing a lot of these things by hand. you know, it's just to give me, whoops, I forgot to deburr. It just gives me the opportunity to check the brass over and make sure everything's good and that I'm not dealing with any problems. So that, my friends, is the trimming step. Okay, now it's time to deburr the flash holes. And what I mean by that is when they manufacture this brass, they drill a hole here in the web of the case for the primer pocket, and then they have a punch that punches this hole through. When it punches that hole through to create the actual primer pocket, or excuse me, the flash hole, there's little burrs, you know, if the brass was like this, and when they punch it up, there's these little burrs that are sticking up inside the case mouth. And so we need to remove those so that we have just inside the case mouth, we have just a hole. The reason we want to do that, the reason we want to remove those burrs, and I don't know if you can see them or not, I'll try to get some light on it. The reason we want to remove those burrs is because it'll help give us more uniform in our release of the bullet. Because each bullet will have the same release as far as ignition. So basically I'm putting this tool in. You can see the cutter coming into the flash hole there. See it? Oh, I lost it there for a second. Had it and lost it. So I'm putting this in. See the cutter sticking there in the flash hole? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut and trim until this thing bottoms out. And again, let's take my hand here. See that brass that I removed? That brass that I removed inside of the case mouth was the brass that, like I said, was there in the manufacturing process. You see how it's shiny in there at the flash hole? Again, when that primer goes off, it's going to give me a nice release, and it's going to give me the same type of burn ratio round per round. This is not generally a step that I do on pistol cartridges, but almost always on rifle cartridges. On a pistol cartridge, I don't think that this step is as necessary as it is on a rifle cartridge because of the fact that pistol barrels are shorter than rifle barrels in general. And obviously you saw that I used the case mouth brush to run in and out of the case. Just making sure everything looks good here. This is called deburring the flash holes. You can skip this step if you want. If you have a deburring flash hole tool, definitely do it on rifle cartridges, especially if it's a hunting type round that you're going to be needing to get a lot of accuracy out of. This is an important step. Another thing about running this case brush through the case mouth is the reason I'm doing that is because when it comes time to seat the bullets later on, I'm going to want those to be clean, those case mouths, so that, see that? So that I have easy seat of my bullet. I want to be able to seat those bullets nice and easy. And if there's any kind of burrs or any kind of trash or dirt or anything on your brass, and you don't use that case mouth brush to get rid of that stuff, then it might scratch your bullet or something like that while you're seating it. We don't want a scratched bullet. We're looking for an accuracy load. These are hunting loads that I'm putting out today. And that's another reason why I'm only doing 10. See that? This is all brass prep. The better you prep your brass and the more steps that you take, the better off you're going to be in the long run. See that? And then on my paper, I write down at the bottom that the flash holes have been deburred, the brass has been trimmed. Once you deburr the flash holes, that is not a thing that you need to do again and again and again. You do that once and you're done for the life of that piece of brass. Now trimming, that's another thing. See that? Now to adjust this flash hole deburring tool, depending on what type of brass you're using, there's a little set screw right here, and you loosen that set screw and you just adjust this thing accordingly. You can adjust it for just about any cartridge you load for. Again, I'm speaking specifically rifle cartridges. Another thing when it comes to deburring the flash holes, you don't want to remove too much material on the inside of the case mouth, on the inside of the web of the case there on the flash hole, because if you do, you'll create a thin web. Now you see this belt around these cases? These are belted rifle cases. If you look at a 30-06 case, let me see if I can find one real quick. You look at a 30-06 and you compare it to this 7 mag, right? You look at those two, and you see the 30-06 does not have that belt at the bottom. The reason that these 7 mags have that belt is because of the excess pressure and we're starting into the Magnum cartridges, and we need that belt to add strength to the web of the case. This is a Magnum cartridge. So you don't want to make that flash hole area thin by removing too much material, because if you do, again, the result could be that you'll make that web of the case weak. Okay, now we have our cases trimmed, and our trim length is 2.490 inches. So I'm going to take my digital calipers and I'm going to check my trim lengths and just see if we're on par. We should be pretty close. 2.490 is what we're looking for. Look at that, right on the money. 2.490. Let's check another one. I'm not going to do them all here, obviously. Looks good. Pretty good. .493. So we're looking good on our trim lengths. Looking good. Might as well check them all. Sorry guys, I lied to you. Since I'm here, I might as well just do them all. 2.490. Looking good. If you want to take any that you spot that might be a little longer and run them through the trimmer again, you can. Sometimes you can squeeze a 1,000th out of that trimmer if you just push a little harder on it. These are looking really good though. Looking good. So our trim lengths are excellent. They're right on the money. Again, 2.490 trim length. One thing that I want to mention real quick is as I go, as steps are completed, I kind of move the stuff away on the bench, away from me. Like I'm not going to need the lubricant anymore, you know. I'm not going to need my drill. I'm not going to need my case mouth brush. All those things kind of as we go, I'm just removing them. So I'm kind of clearing up my bench as I go. Now it's time to prime the cases. Okay, now it's time to prime our cases. But before I actually prime, I want to talk to you a little bit about primers. A primer consists of three parts. There's a cup, which you see right here. This is the cup. This piece is the anvil. And the third piece or component would be the actual priming compound. Okay, so the anvil sits inside of the cup. And what happens is when the firing pin hits the cup of the primer, you see that dent? When the firing pin hits the cup of the primer, what happens is it forces the anvil and the cup to touch each other. Well, in between the primer, cup, and the anvil is again that priming compound. So when those two pieces come together, they ignite that priming compound, kind of like the old Strike Anywhere matches. So when it comes to getting your primers that you're going to be using, I recommend laying them out. Whoops, one of them fell through the cracks. I recommend laying them out face up and making sure that they all have those three components. Let me grab one more. Bear with me. So I have 10 primers there. And again, I'm just looking down at them very closely. I'm looking at them to verify that they have a cup, obviously, that they have an anvil, and that they have priming compound. Now in our case right now, you can see that they have all of the three components that we need. So now that we've verified that our primers are good, that we have the components that we need, and that, because if you don't have a cup, or if you don't have a anvil or priming compound, you will not have any ignition. But since we have that, there's two ways to prime that I recommend. One is the hand priming tool. This one's made by Lee. This is a great tool. You basically push this thing down and rotate this lid off. Then you put, I'll do 5 on here and I'll do the other 5 another way. So I basically take 5 primers and I put them in there face up. Now if they were face down, say you throw them in there and there's a few of them face down, you see these little rings? See that traction there? When you shake this, what that does is that helps orient the primers for you. See that, how they turn face up? Now I put the lid on, locks into place. Now basically push this thing down, you can see that a primer went into that place. Once a primer goes into there, I can prime a case. Now you can see inside here there's a metal shell holder. Now this shell holder is this type. Don't get that confused with the shell holder that your press takes, because again, the one in the press, it has that corresponding groove that fits into the press. The priming shell holders that fit this tool, again, they don't have that. So you'll have a little chart, you'll have all these shell holders that are for the priming tool, and you'll be looking at this chart trying to figure out what caliber you got, what number shell holder you need. So in our case, we were using a 7 rem mag. It's right here, got to be on the corner, don't it? We're using a 7 rem mag. See that? So that number is a number 5. So you can see that we have a number 5 shell holder in our priming tool. So to prime the case, we have a primer inside. We're going to take the case, put it in the shell holder, point the mouth of the case away from ourselves, and we're just going to compress this forward. What that does is that puts the primer into the case. And you want to check that and make sure that the primer is seated flush or just a little bit below flush. So we're set. There's a good primed case. Let me back out and give you a little bit better view of it. Again, I'm going to do 5 of them this way, and then I'm going to do the other 5 on the press. So I put it in using my thumbs, and I just kind of push, and it puts the primer in the case. And immediately I run my finger across, and I'm just inspecting, making sure everything's good. Everything looks good. I'm just setting them down on the table. If you're a younger person, or if you have strong hands, this is a good option for priming your brass. It's fast, and you can do it anywhere. You can be in the house watching a movie, and you could be priming a batch of brass. Again, it slides in just like a regular shell holder, and you just kind of push. Watch up here. That comes down, and then you take a look and make sure they're seated well. So those 5 are done. Let me show you the other option. Okay, on my press, you can see, if I move this back, you can see that I have a priming arm here, and there's a priming cup. There's 2 different sizes. There's a large and a small, and since we're using a large primer, we're going to put that cup just like that. And from here, let me adjust. Let me get set up. We're going to take a primer, set it in the cup, anvil up, and then what we'll do is we'll raise the ram slightly just to clear, so that the case, so that when we put the case in, it'll slide past. Whoops, sorry about the fingers in the way there, folks. So it'll slide past, and then once we get that, then what I like to do is I'll grab the bar of my press. I'll grab the body of my press, and I'll push with my hand right here, just like so. And what that'll do is that'll prime that case. Then you'll look at the case. You'll see that it's flush or just a little bit below flush, and you're set. Let me back out a little more and show you a little closer, or a little bit further view. So again, I put the primer in the priming cup. I back the ram up just a little bit so that I can clear the primer. Put it like so. Push it all the way in. Use my fingers on the press, and I'm going to push with my hand right here. And that'll prime these cases. This method works really good if you don't have a lot of dexterity or strength in your hands. You can actually use the press, and it'll give you leverage. It'll give you a mechanical advantage over the priming step. Sorry about that, folks. So there's my primer in there. Raise the ram a little bit, put the case in, and you're only going down a little bit. You're not going down very far. So as soon as I get that, I want to kind of look at that and see if it's flush or just a little below. Everything looks good right there. So I'm just raising it up a little bit. There it is. And that's all it takes. Nothing too crazy. Now you'll notice, if you look at the brass, when I'm reloading this brass, I'm using the same lot of brass. Okay, these are all WW Supers, 7mm Remington Magnum. Okay, now I'm getting ready to use the RCBS 502 scale, but before I use it, I want to verify a few things. Okay, the first thing I want to verify is that this weight, this little indicator Okay, you see that little pointer? I want to make sure that that indicator is on 0. Once I've verified that, I want to come down to this other end of the scale and I want to make sure that this little weight is on 0. Once I've verified that both of those weights are on 0, I'll come over to this other end of the scale and I'll check to see that these two lines are related, that they're corresponding to each other. And right now they're not. So I need to make a small adjustment to 0 my scale. And what that adjustment is there's a small plastic ring that it sits, you know, the foot here, and I'm going to rotate this foot until I can get this scale to orient to 0. Depending on which way you need to go, like see I'm bringing it towards me and you can see that the needle is slowly getting closer to 0. I'm just pulling that towards me. If I go too far, which I may have, then I'll go back away from me. Okay, but in our case right now you can see again very clearly that those two lines are related, that they're very close. They're zeroed out there. In fact, we're a little high. So I'm going to pull this little screw towards me a little bit. Or should I say away from me. The screw is hard to turn sometimes. So it doesn't take much. And I keep bumping it to let it magnetically dampen. See those two lines are very close? This scale is now zeroed. At this point, once my scale is zeroed, I want to look at my load data, and I can go anywhere from 58 grains to 65 grains. Today our target weight is 60 grains, and that's because the Lyman 49th edition and this Hodgdon, they both gave me that same recipe. 7 rem mag, 60 grains for a 160 grain Nosler partition bullet. Now of course they don't say Magnum primers, but in our 49th edition it did call for Magnum primers, and the spectrum was exactly what I have written here, 58 to 65. So we're going to settle at 60. Let me get that Lyman 49th edition real quick and I'm going to show you that recipe. So we're looking at Hodgdon 4831 right there where my thumb is, and we're going from 58 grains all the way up to 65 grains. So again, 58 to 65, everything's looking good. We want 60. So let's go over here, and since it's 60 even, we don't need to make any adjustments with this small weight over here. We only need to adjust these weights, this one here. Okay, so these small lines that you see, let me zoom in a little more, sorry about that. Every one of these lines represents 5. Okay, so I have 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 is this first big line. 30, 35, 40, 45, 50 is the next big line. 55, 60, 65, 70, 75. Okay, so we need 55, we need 60. So we need to move this weight to the second line past 50. Okay, so we have 55 and then 60. So we're set on 60. Our scale is now set to throw a 60 grain charge. So again, we're going to scoop over here on this back side. We're going to scoop until we get that thing up around 60, and then if we get somewhat close, we'll be able to trickle up a little bit if needed. And we can also use our scoop here in our hand. If we go too far or something like that, we can remove some and put it back in here. Again, it's important that we're not touching the powder. And I'm just pushing the bowl down because I want to activate the scale and make sure that we're not binding or stuck on something. Okay, when you start seeing it getting close, obviously we want to use smaller increments. See, it looks like we're getting close. So I'm just going to take a few small little granules here. I don't have that much in my scoop, and I'm just going to hand trickle basically. Let's go to our trickler. The scale's finicky, but I like that because we are dealing with powder. There we go, we're starting to come up. And it looks like we're just about there. Might be just a hair under. I'm going to give it 1 or 2 more granules. And that looks good. Let me show you another method of checking this scale. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take an empty piece of brass. I'm going to put the empty piece of brass on the scale. I'm going to turn the scale on, and the scale is going to zero to that piece of brass. Now I'll take my powder funnel over here, take the piece of brass, make sure I push it all the way up in. Let's find our charge. Put our charge into here. And we'll set that piece of brass that's loaded back on the scale. Look at that, 60.0, right on the button. Now normally this might seem like a cumbersome process. You might be thinking, man, you are doing a lot, dude. You are just going overboard on everything. This is the only reason I'm doing that, people, is because I'm trying to share techniques with you. I'm trying to share how I reload, and so I'm showing different ideas. This isn't, I don't do it all slow like this every time I load ammunition. I'll show you another option. Okay, right now you're probably looking at my scale and you might be wondering what I'm doing. Right now I'm going to turn my scale on and I'm going to zero my bowl to the scale. Okay, from here you see that my scale is now zeroed. I'm going to come up here, bear with the camera work here, and I have a powder measure. Now this powder measure throws powder by volume, okay, not by weight. If I have a reservoir and I pull my finger down, you can see that if I was to put powder from the top, I would be able to get more powder or less powder. You see what I'm saying? So this adjustment screw is how I adjust more or less powder. To get more powder, I turn this screw counterclockwise. To get less powder, I screw it clockwise. Now, I have this thing set just a little bit below 60 grains. Okay, and again, it's throwing by volume. So I have it throwing just under 60 grains because, as you saw earlier, I had my trickler sitting next to my scale. My scale just turned off, so I had to turn it back on. So I'm going to go ahead and throw my charges. Now, one thing I recommend is if you have a funnel on the bottom of your powder thrower, I'd recommend taking this out anytime you're dealing with with rifle powder, because sometimes these rifle powders will jam up in that small hole, and especially if you're using a large load like we are, like 60 grains. If we were throwing 25 grains, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. But because we're throwing a large amount of powder, we want to make sure and take that out so that we can have a clear access to let the powder come out. Now my scale is zeroed, so I'm going to take my pan, I'm going to rotate up and back down. And what happens is it throws the powder charge on the upstroke. See that? I have a bowl full of powder and I'm going to weigh it. We should be just under 60 grains. So we're at 59.1, so from here I'm going to just slowly trickle up until I get to 60 grains. Now you could use the balance scale to do this, or you could use this electronic scale. Personally, my opinion, I like the electronic scales better. So there we are at 60 grains. Now let me back out. I have a empty case here. I have my funnel. I'm going to pour the powder into the case. I want to make sure I get a good charged case. Again, I'm going to put my bowl back on my scale just to make sure that it's zeroed. And if it does, I'm going back to the powder measure with the bowl, and I'm going to throw another charge. 1, 2. Back on the scale. 58.6. So let's trickle up a little bit. Now normally you could dial it in a little bit closer, but I'm dialed it, you know, just a hair under on purpose because I want to show that this can be trickled up to. So I got a little bit over, so I'm removing a couple granules. Let's probably throw maybe 1 or 2 more. I'm looking for 60 right on the button. I'm hoping that these are going to be real accurate loads, so I'm kind of trying to do a good job to make sure I'm getting things done well. If you sit here and you pour the powder fast, you see how the powder clumps up there, and you got to sit there and tap on it to watch the powder go down like I did before. Let me show you another trick that you can use to not have to do that. So I'm going to throw a charge here. 1, 2, 59.7. Let's get it up to 60. Okay, whoops, a little hot. Not hot, but I'm looking for consistency, so I'm looking for accurate loads here. So okay, here is our funnel. Here is our case, and here's the powder that we're going to charge it with. If you pour slightly higher, as the powder goes in, it'll kind of ricochet around in the funnel, and you notice it bounced all the way in, no problems. So that's one way that you can charge these cases fairly quickly. So again, I'm throwing my powder, I'm measuring 59.1. The trickler makes a good job if you're wanting a very consistent charge. Now the difference honestly between 60.2 and 60.0, honestly it's not that significant of a difference on the range. But I am loading for ultimate reliability and accuracy. See how I poured it from a distance and that stuff just went in no problem? So let's go back to the powder measure. If you're bumping, like on the upstroke or the downstroke, you want your bumps to be consistent on each load that you throw, because you don't want to have that thing throw any different powder. You don't want one to be hot and one to be mild and things like that. We're at 59.4 right now. 59.7, 60, 60.2. I keep going over a little bit, but that's okay. So again, I want to throw the powder in. So I'm just going to pour it a little bit higher, let it kind of ricochet around in there, and it generally, it's still clumped up, but generally that works pretty good as a technique to do your powder. Okay, I'm going to share with you another technique that I like to use to put powder into these shells. I'm going to take my bowl off. I'm going to put my piece of brass on the scale. I don't normally do it this way too often, but this is another thing you can do. I'll turn the scale on and it'll zero to that piece of brass. So from here, I'm going to take this piece of brass up to the powder measure, and I'm going to put my funnel on top of my piece of brass. And so basically I'm going to throw the charge directly in to the brass from the powder measure itself. Now I'm going to take this piece of brass and I'm going to go right back down to the scale, and I'm going to look, and you see that I'm at 59.1. Now, if I was loading plinking loads and I didn't really care where I was within this spectrum, like if 59.9 was good or 60.2 was good, and I didn't really care how precise I was, this would be a good method. You could also take the piece of brass, if you had the funnel still in your powder measure, you could put the piece of brass up to the funnel itself and throw the charge. But again, because we're throwing such a big volume of powder, that's why we had to take the funnel out. That's why we're using other methods, you know, such as this bowl or the funnel directly into a case. So with that being said, we don't have a very easy way to trickle up when we're filling just the brass. That's why I would not want to do it this way if I'm looking for 60.0 on the button. So I'm going to take that brass away. I'm going to put the bowl back on, hit the tare, that'll zero the scale to the bowl. Okay, now this is the tare button right here. Now I'll pour this powder into the bowl, and we were like 59 or something like that, 59.1. so again, I'll trickle up to 60. And the only reason I'm doing this so cumbersome is because I'm looking for very high accurate loads. So from here, I'm going to take my case and my funnel again, and I'm going to pour the powder charge into this from a distance so that hopefully it'll ricochet around a little bit and I won't have to sit there and bang on it too much. I'm going to take my bowl over here, throw another charge. Let's see where we are. 59.3. Trickle up to 60. You know, and there's a lot of people out there that are using these powder scales that have a powder dispenser on them, and that's a good option too. That's a really good option, in fact, because you can dial in on the keyboard what charge you want and it'll just keep spitting them out. So in a way, I'm kind of an old school guy. I'm kind of doing it the old way, but you know what, there's nothing wrong with that at all. So the last one, 59.4, 59.7, 60 on the button. That, my friends, is how I like to charge my cases. Okay, right now what I'm doing is I'm looking down inside the mouths of the cases, and what I'm trying to look for is I'm comparing the volumes of powder against each case, and I'm looking at how high that powder level is in reference to the case next to it. And if I see one that's too high or one that's too low, well then of course I would take that powder and measure it and see what the problem is. So in our case today, everything looks good. Now another thing I want to mention, as far as this trickler being out and the scales being out and powder still in here, I recommend leaving that stuff alone like that until you're finished with the reloading process, because if you were to knock one of these over or spill one or something like that, you'll need to go get that powder back, and it would be hard to do if you were to put everything away right now. So leave your powder and everything out, and that's my recommendation. Okay, now we're getting close to seating bullets. So what we need to do, we're done priming obviously, so we're going to put this priming arm away, and we're going to remove this decapping and resizing die, and we're going to get our bullet seating die, which will also crimp. We're going to get that die and put it in the press. Now you notice when I'm taking this die out, one thing that I like to do is I like to undo the lock ring pretty much all the way out, so that when I put it away, when I come back next time to load, everything's all the way out. These are brand new dies. Now this is the bullet seating stem on the top of this die. So what I want to do here is I want to loosen this thing out, and I'm going to back this thing all the way out as high as it'll go, because I don't want anything to happen. Okay, I really like these RCBS dies. They're good dies. And I'm also backing out the die lock ring. Now from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a loaded case charged with powder, put it in the press, and I'm going to raise the ram all the way up, and I'm going to thread the die body down until the die body touches the case mouth. Once the die body touches the case mouth, you'll feel it. Feel that right there? From the time that it touches the case mouth, I'm going to back the die back about a half of a turn. From here I'm going to hold the die body, and I'm going to lock the die lock ring. The reason I hold the body of the die while I lock the lock ring is because I don't want to be twisting the die body around while I'm locking this lock ring. The reason I back the die out is because for right now, temporarily, I'm taking away the crimp feature of the die. So from here, I'm going to take a bullet, I'm going to lower the ram, and I'm going to put the bullet into the case. Now this is kind of a short press, so I have to kind of put the bullet up into the die a little bit, and now I'm going to slowly raise the ram up. You'll feel a partial seat of the bullet. Okay? See that? We have a partial seat of the bullet. Now we got to go back and we got to remind ourselves what is our overall length that we're looking for. And in our case, let's refer back to this. Our overall length, let's point at it here. 3.29 inches. That's what we're looking for. So let's take our calipers. Now I know that we're probably way beyond 3.29 inches, but I'm just showing you. 3.29 is what we need. So let's measure this case. 3.56. So we're way off. Let's go back to our die, and what I want to do is I want to adjust the bullet seating stem clockwise. I need a screwdriver for that. Bear with me. I want to adjust it clockwise, maybe a turn or two. Now I'm going to put the case back in, and I'm going to raise the ram. This is going to seat the bullet a little more, and then we'll come back and we'll check that length again. Okay, so we've seated the bullet a little deeper. We're looking for 3.29, 3.50, so we're still too long. So again, we're going to turn this thing in about a turn or two. I gave it about a turn, now that's about 2 turns. We're going to raise the ram, seat the bullet a little deeper. You might be wondering why I'm making such large increments on my turns up here. That's because we're so far away from reaching our overall length that we can afford to make big adjustments on the die right now. 3.44. We're looking for 3.29. So again, let's come back over. I gave that about a turn and a half maybe. Raise the ram, seat the bullet, come down. .39, we're getting closer. So the closer you get to the desired overall length, the smaller the adjustments need to be on your bullet seating stem. So I'll probably just go about 1 turn. Let's raise the ram, seat the bullet a little deeper. We're going in small increments. We're just seating a little deeper until we get the actual overall length that we're looking for. 3.36. We're still a little ways away. I could have made a bigger adjustment, I guess. So I went about 1.5 turns. Raise the ram, seat the bullet, and you'll feel the bullet seat each time. You can see that this press seats these bullets beautifully. 3.32. We're getting close. 3.29 is what we're looking for. So now, this bullet seating stem, we're going to start making smaller adjustments. I'm going to go about 1/2 turn here. Let's raise the ram. When it comes to adjusting this bullet seating stem, I don't want to adjust too much, because if I do, it's kind of like cutting a board too short. Once you go past, it's hard to undo that. So we need to get, the closer we get, the smaller we need to be so that we can stay on the longer side, if you will. 3.30. So we're getting extremely close. So now I'm going to take my thing and I'm going to give it about 1/4 turn. And this should do it. If not, we'll be very close. We're looking for 3.29. 3.2945. So from here, about 1/16 of a turn, maybe 1/8 of a turn, small adjustment. I would rather make an adjustment and have it not be enough and make another adjustment than to make that adjustment and go too far. 3.287. So we're just under the desired overall length. I think we're good. Okay, so now is the big question. The big question that we're looking at now is, do we want to crimp this bullet? Now the answer, in my opinion, now this gets kind of funny, because some people swear up and down that you need a crimp, other people say you don't need to. My honest opinion, okay, this is just my opinion, folks. I don't think on a bolt action rifle that a big crimp or any kind of crimp is necessary, because I believe that the case mouth tension has enough to hold the bullet in place. Okay, when we came down out of the resizing die and the expander ball expanded the case mouth to the appropriate dimensions, and now that we're seating a bullet into that, and there's pressure and things, I don't feel that it's necessary, personally. On a bolt action, on a semi-auto, absolutely, because again, I think there's enough case mouth tension to hold this bullet. But what I will say is, if we're going to be loading for accuracy, I would recommend a tiny crimp. Okay, and the reason I would recommend that is because I want to get uniformity out of my bullets. I want to get uniform release. Okay, so if I have a slight, very mild crimp on every bullet, that's going to take the bullet approximately the same amount of pressures that are going to build up to release that bullet, and therefore that could result in an accurate bullet. So today, yes, we're going to put a mild crimp on this bullet. Now, to do that, we are going to unlock the die lock ring. We're going to back this out a couple of turns, this die lock ring. From here, I'm going to take my bullet, I'm going to put it into the press. I'm going to get a little closer so you can see exactly what I'm doing. I'm going to put the bullet into the press. I'm also going to undo all of my bullet seating stem adjustments all the way out. I'm going to take everything out. Everything that we just established as far as bullet seating depth, I'm taking out. Now I'm going to slowly raise the ram until the bullet goes up into the die. And from here, with the ram raised all the way up, I'm going to adjust the die body until it touches the case. Once the die body touches the case, it's time for me to make small increments in the crimp feature of the die. And what I mean by crimp feature of the die is moving the actual die body downward. See, so I'm going to release the bullet a little bit. I'm going to turn the whole die body like a 1/16 of a turn. I'm going to raise the ram, and what that'll do is that'll put a little bit of a crimp on the bullet. I'm going to inspect the cartridge for crimp. If it's not enough to my desired crimp, I will adjust the die body clockwise another 1/16 of a turn or so, and I'll raise the ram and I'll give it a little more crimp. From there, I'll inspect the cartridge. To me, that crimp that I felt feels good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to raise the ram and I'm going to lock the die body in place by having the ram raised, and I'm going to lock the die body lock ring. What that'll do is that'll lock that crimp feature in place. Now, from here, I'm going to take the bullet seating stem and I'm going to thread it all the way down. And what I want to do is I want to match the bullet seating depth. Now remember, we were just a slight bit shorter than what we needed. So I'm going to back this seating stem out backwards about 1/16, maybe 1/32 of a turn. That should give us the exact overall length that we're looking for. Now I'm going to lock the bullet seating stem lock nut. So now this die is set to do two operations at once. It's set to crimp the bullet as it seats the bullet. So let's take a look and see how that goes. So I got the bullet in there, raise the ram. Now we're seating a bullet and crimping a bullet all in one fashion, all in one motion. Let's take a look. Let's measure this baby. We're looking for 3.29 inches. Looks like my calipers died. 3.29 is our desired length. We should be right on the money. 3.2895. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? So not only do we have the exact overall length that we're looking for, we also have the mild crimp that's going to be consistent with all of our bullets. And again, the reason that I was talking about that crimp is so that we can have the appropriate, the consistent amount of pressures building up in the bullet to release it approximately the same time. Okay, we've trimmed our flash holes, we've deburred our flash holes, I'm saying. That gives us a uniform ignition on the powder charge. Plus with this, it's going to give us uniform bullet seating depth and crimp. Okay, now that my die is set, there's no need to make any more adjustments up top up here because my die is set. So from here, I'm just seating bullets. And this is pretty much the end of the operation. So I'm just coming through with these, seating these bullets. Again, one thing I want to mention is when I put the brass into the shell holder and I'm putting a bullet on top and I'm getting ready to seat a bullet, I'm always looking down inside the case mouth to make sure that something didn't spill, just to make sure that I have good powder charge in my bullet and things of that nature, because I don't want to seat a bullet on top of something that's not charged correctly. So I've got 4 more to do. This is honestly one of my favorite bullets to load. I really like this 7 Rem mag. It's a great gun. It'll knock down, in my opinion, just about anything in North America. Of course, that might be, I'm sure there's some people out there that might counter that. But in my opinion, this is one of the best hunting loads made. It's a very flat shooting bullet. You know, you got that .284 diameter bullet versus a .308 bullet, such as an .06. It's just a beautiful round, it really is. So again, we're inspecting everything, we're checking everything, making sure our bullet seating depth is good. Let's check this one. This was the last one we did. So let's check it and see what we've got here. We're looking for 3.29. Look at that. Right on the money, folks. You don't get any cleaner than that. I'm really happy with the way that things went today. That's a beautiful looking bullet. Okay folks, we're just about done. Last but not least, what I like to do is I like to take these bullets and I like to inspect them. At this point is also a good time to take the rag and just clean them up. I'm looking for any kind of signs of problems in the brass, any kind of inconsistencies, cracks, any kind of pressure signs possibly from previous loads. I'm looking at the depths of the primers, making sure the web of the case doesn't have any issues. Sometimes the extraction point of the case has problems. And I'm just inspecting these cartridges one at a time, making sure that they're all set and that they're good to go. These should be some very highly accurate rounds. When we take them out to the range, they should shoot very well. You know, I'm just, at this point, I'm just really, for the lack of a better term, I'm just double checking, triple checking. You know, just making sure that there's nothing that I've missed. Cleaning them up a little bit. I'm getting rid of any DCL that might be on there. Of course, lanolin's not hard on your hands at all. It's actually good for your hands, and if there was some lubricant left in it, you know, on these bullets, it's not going to hurt your action or your gun or anything like that, as long as it's not excessive. Just checking them out, making sure everything's good. You know, you might roll them around and see what the concentricity looks like on them. You know, I don't have a concentricity gauge, but I can sure roll them and see how true the bullets look. Just things like that, because we did build these for accuracy. You know, and again, you know, like I mentioned earlier in the video, IMR 4350 is also an excellent powder for the 7 Rem mag. But again, you know, I mentioned it earlier, the reason I chose this Hodgdon 4831 shortcut was because, again, you know, I'm not trying to reiterate or bore you, but it was because that 4350 seemed to have like a really hard kick, you know, and these bullets are just as accurate, if not more accurate. And they're a lot, I mean, the recoil is not much different, but it's a smoother recoil. It's not like that sudden jerk like that, you know. It's a very good recoil. And again, they got a little bit more velocity out of this than I did out of the 4350. Just a little bit. This 7 Rem mag is definitely a rifle that shoots very flat. You know, if I compare it to my 30-06, I would suggest that the difference in recoil, for those of you who haven't shot a 7 mag, and you might be wondering what the recoil feels like. I would say that it's about 10%, no, excuse me, about 30% more than what the 30-06 has, recoil wise. It's not that much of a difference. So I'm going to line these babies up. Those are some beautiful bullets. This paper, this load data that I did today, it goes with those bullets no matter where they go. If I give them to a friend, if I use them, if I put them away somewhere and I come back 3 years from now and I see them, I know exactly what they are, what the powder is. I'll also write the date, generally. Right up here on the top of the paper, I'll write the date, today's date, and that way I know exactly when I built them, what they have in them, what kind of velocities I'm expecting to get out of them. And that right there, my friends, is how I like to find my sweet spot on my rifle. Some rifles like things a little hotter, some rifles like things a little milder. And you know, honestly, what I do to try to find the sweet spot is I'll load, you know, like say our spectrum again, from 58 to 65. I might load 5 rounds that are 58s, 5 of them that are 59s, 5 of them 60s, all the way up to 65. And then I'll go shoot them, and I'll have a separate piece of cardboard for each 5 rounds, and then I'll find which ones seem to hit the most accurate. And let's say for our case it was the 59s that hit real good, or 59.5s or something. Then I'll come home and I'll say, okay, the 59 range was good, so then I'll load them 59.2, 59.4, 59.6, 59.8, 60. And that right there is how I find my sweet spot. My gun likes them at 60 grains. So again, folks, I want to say thank you for watching. I hope you got some good information out of this video today. I hope that you like the information that I gave to you. I apologize if the video seemed too long. That's never my intention. Sometimes I get carried away explaining things or trying to say certain details and things of that nature. So my apology if I got too long-winded in some of the sections on this video. But as always, I want to say thanks again for watching. Please feel free to like this video, share this video, give me a thumbs up if you like what I'm doing here. And even more so, if you like the kind of content that you see on my channel, please give me a subscription. I'd love to have you on board with us. And as always, have a beautiful day. Now get out there and get you a 7 Rem mag and reload some bullets. One more quick thing that I want to say before I go. A lot of people have the misconception that they think to reload a large Magnum cartridge like this that they need some big old fancy press. I've proven it today that you don't. As long as you're patient with what you're doing and you understand the reloading philosophy and the principles, and you're very aware of minor differences in the process, like if you feel something hang or you feel something that's bound, as long as you're not that guy that just keeps cranking on the handle, you can probably get by with something like this RCBS Partner. It's a good press. We'll talk to you later. Bye.